Hello and welcome to Sisterhood of the Traveling Paperbacks, a cheerful and irreverent book club podcast all about genre fiction, fandom, and the things that make us happy. I'm Claire.
I'm Chelsea.
And I'm Kay.
At the moment, I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to read over the Christmas holidays. Okay. You know, this whole dilemma of what do you take in your suitcase if you are going home for Christmas, because obviously I want to take all the things, but I'm probably just going to take my Kindle because I have a lot of arcs on there, a lot of review copies from publishers, and also just books that I have bought throughout the year and not gotten to. And I also have a lot of shorter stuff, short fiction, which I want to get to because I would like to finish my Goodreads goal, and I'm quite far behind. The thing that I'm reading right now, though, is this adorable middle grade crime series called Murder, Most, and Ladylike. And it's a series I've been following for a while because the author is from... the author did NaNoWriMo in London one year, so I know her. And it's just the most adorable murdery thing ever. It is so great. It's set in the 1930s. It starts in this very proper girls' boarding school in the UK. And we have two best friends, Hazel Wong and Daisy Wells, and they have a detective agency and they solve crime together. And the fifth book, which I'm reading right now, is called Mistletoe and Murder. And it's a Christmas-themed murder that happens in Cambridge at the university. So we have one murder in a school, one murder that's like a locked room mystery in a very proper British mansion, another one that's on the Orient Express, and then another murder at the school. And this one is just like Cambridge and Christmassy, and it's wonderful. And I'm getting the first book in the series in French for my niece for Christmas, so I'm super excited for her to get into that as well.
Oh, that sounds like a great gift. That's awesome.
And also Nimona, the book we're reading today. So that's like my
Yay!
I'm a great auntie points for this year.
Congratulations.
Yeah, those are good choices. All right, well, I am currently... Reading right now is weird for me because my type A brain doesn't want to read anything that's going to throw off my end of year stats.
Fair.
So nothing that I'm going to like log. So there's one book I'm finishing up, and that is It by Stephen King, which I started reading in October.
Oh, wow.
But that book is literally like 1,000 pages long.
It's almost as long as The Stand.
Yeah, it's
Stephen
huge.
King people. Like, it's huge.
And I finally hit 800 pages last night. So I'm like 80% done. So I'm gonna finish by Christmas.
Now, remind me what format you're consuming that in.
Mass market paperback.
Oh, God. Okay.
Yes. It is
it's huge.
huge.
It's hard to haul around with you.
Yeah, like it's, and that's part of the problem is that it hasn't been hauled around with me. It's been my at-home book, which that's like where I get the least amount of reading time because I'm just busy doing other shit while I'm at home. But
the audiobook of that is great if other people are considering reading that, and much more portable, so...
Oh, yes. I'm currently second in line on hold for the audiobook, which I also did in October. So apparently lots of people in the greater Kansas City area are wanting to listen to it on audio right now. So who knew? But yeah, it's very disconcerting. A creepy clown book in October feels way more fitting than a creepy clown book at Christmas.
Yeah.
But like, it's
And
fine.
yet,
It's
still
great.
great.
I love
Still
Stephen
great.
King, and his version of small town horror just like is right up my alley. I love everything he does, so I'm really enjoying it. But then to counterbalance that, I am 8 chapters into a 10-chapter non-magical modern day AU Harry Potter OT3 featuring James, Sirius, and Lily. It's called Bravehearts by Soliloquize, and I love it really hard.
I think you just named Claire's no TP.
Yeah, that's fine, Claire. We'll throw down later.
No.
We'll throw down when it's not going to add like another 20 minutes to this podcast, but like we can go for that.
It's a very simple thing. Like anything that features either Sirius Black or Remus Lupin should have them be together, or it's an OTP for me.
That's fair. I can see if like Wolfstar is your primary ship, how you would not want to like go messing with that in any kind of format.
It was my first OTP.
I mean, that's fair. So I do track my fic reading, and I'm looking at my reading log right now, and I think I'm on track to read 80 million words of fan fiction.
That's disgusting. Like, it's awesome, but that's a disgustingly large amount of anything to read. Like, that's so awesome.
Like, if you do the math or something, that's like an extra 200 something books basically worth of reading.
That is great.
Which is fine. I think I'm going to end up reading
insane.
like 150
I'm thinking
books
about logging my fic reading for 2017, actually.
I'm going to.
Do it. It makes me feel a lot better about my book number.
I want to add my fic reading and then also the short story stuff that I do, because I read a lot of like random shorts from different like SFF websites, and I need to get better about like keeping track of them.
So for my reading right now, I'm continuing on with Men Fail at Everything, a space opera, and I'm on the third book, Abaddon's Gate. I don't know, the audiobook said it weird. I'm not sure. It's by James S.A. Corey. It's that same space opera series I was reading before.
Is that the third book?
It's the third one, so I've read the first two now. It's going okay so far. I think the start was a little slow, but not nearly as slow as Leviathan Wakes, so I'm excited still. And I am also finally finishing... I've had A Closed and Common Orbit on my to-read by Becky Chambers on my to-read for like ever, and I'm actually the person who requested it at my library, and I didn't manage to finish it before I finished my initial hold on it, so I'm finally getting to read that, and I'm really excited.
It's so good, Kay. It's so good.
I mean,
I'm so excited for you to finish it so we can talk about it.
Right, the first book was one of my top, like, 5 reads of last year, so I'm assuming I'm gonna love it. And if I don't love it, we'll just not talk about it. It's fine.
No, you're gonna love it. Like, I will vouch for that. Like, if you don't love it, I really don't think this podcast can continue. Like, if you thought coffee was the breaking point, I feel like this is where we're gonna have to
We can no longer be friends. Friendship
like, I'm sorry.
over.
Friendship terminated. That's a line we can't cross together. I'm sorry.
We need to have that discussion some point about, like, are there any books where you're like, we can't be friends anymore if you don't like this? Because I think everybody has that one where you're like, I don't know, man.
I don't know, man. Not to end like a friendship. Like, there are some where like if you don't like this, I might start to seriously question like your taste and like how good your tastes are.
That
but like, I don't know if there's
definitely
anything
To
where,
Say
like,
Nothing of the Dog by Connie Willis.
Yeah.
If you don't like that book, I'm like, I don't know if I can recommend things to you.
I'm not sure that I've read that. You know what happened? What happened is that I read the Doomsday book and I was like, I want to die.
It's so long and depressing.
They are very different.
I'm gonna take
Claire.
a Connie Willis
it's beautifully written.
But like all of the creepy germs and bad feelings that Doomsday Book gives you, To Say Nothing of the Dog erases them with like fun boating trips down rivers and like
Adorable
crazy shenanigans
animals.
with like time travel and a lost kitten. Like, it's just
all right. I will read it.
I didn't know anything about it when I started. This is just randomly delightful in that best like British drawing room comedy kind of way. And
like,
I really
Connie
enjoyed
Willis
it.
and I are not on good terms right now because she was talking shit about romance and her new book was not great. But like, To Say Nothing of the Dog is always one of my favorite things to recommend to people. Oh, I almost never read category romance.
I'm not sure what category romance means.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so category romance is a thing. Like, I think Mills and Boon does it too at Harlequin. They have like set categories where stuff kind of follows specific tropes and themes. So there's like the suspense line, and there's like the more erotic romance line, and
it like
there's
it
like
helps
kind of
book
Christian romance
sellers
line.
and shelvers and librarians categorize and metadata all their stuff correctly. So like, it's a romance book, but if it's like a suspense romance or like a fantasy romance, it'll go in a different place than like just romance with a capital R.
So it's both a marketing and like a genre definition tool, I guess. I don't know like the best way to define it.
Because like, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kay, but like probably most romance novels that you're thinking of would be considered
Like
category
when
romance,
people
right?
are talking shit about romance, the stuff you see at the grocery store is such garbage. Like when you see people like throwing down about that, they're usually talking about category romance, which they're being very unfair, but like that is where that like perception comes from, which is totally unfair. The only reason I really don't read a ton of them is they're just shorter than I usually like. But the super romance line from Harlequin is longer. And this one is called, because I am terrible at remembering names, it's called All I Have by Nicole Helm, and it's the first thing I've ever read by her. So I cannot vouch for the quality of anything else. But it was adorable, and it was like about two small family farmers who fall in love being like nemesis at a farmer's market. And I'm like, I'm so weak to that. Like, how was I
That
not
is just the
supposed
cutest
to like
thing.
that?
I've read a fic that does that, and I loved it.
It was super cute. And like the heroine is a 26-year-old virgin, and like she's like, I wasn't like waiting for anything specific, I just wanted to sleep with someone who I actually liked. So they don't like wait too long to have sex, because she does want to have sex, but like it was all handled very well, and I liked it a lot. And that's everything I've been reading. Other than Nimona.
Yes.
Nimona. All right, then. So then should we talk about Nimona?
So today we are talking about Nimona by Noelle Stevenson. It is a graphic novel that is written, lettered, art, colored. She did everything herself, which if you're not super into comics, you may not know that isn't actually very common. A lot of times there's someone who just writes and someone who does the various different parts of the art, including like lettering is often done by someone else. So I kind of adore that she does it herself, and it's a very distinctive style. It started out as a school project, which I think is amazing. She started it her junior year, and it ended up being her senior thesis, and it was a web comic. So you do definitely see a transition in style from the beginning to the end of this. I do also want to talk about her art style, because it's very particular. And
well, what I would say about like whenever we do comics in future is like the art style is so particular and subjective. Like it might, you know, you're never
it
gonna
might not
say
be
like
someone's jam. Yeah.
you're never gonna say this is, you know, even if it's very well drawn, you might not like it. So we can say we like it, but I don't think it's worth like spending ages discussing it, you know?
Well, yeah, there's like, well, because there's like, do you like it? And then there's like, does it fit the story and aid in the storytelling? Because like, and this, I think in this case, it does both, and it does both really
totally
well. Like, I think, because probably like my one quibble about it is that that the beginning is a little rough. Like, you can tell in the beginning it was a web comic, and she was going from kind of these.
She started it as a junior year in college project. Like, that was the advent of.
And you can just see the development. And it's not even that the beginning is bad, but you can just definitely see the improvements as you go through the comic. That by the time you get to the end, I feel like her art style matches the tone and stuff of the graphic novel a lot more.
And I also
but I just love Nimona as a person.
I love everyone. They're all great.
But I feel like that's a thing that happens in a lot of different web comics that I follow, is that you can see the art style changing, and it's not necessarily bad when you start, but it's one of the pleasures of reading a web comic on a regular basis. I came to Nimona when it was already a book that everybody was talking about and saying how great it was. But there are web comics that I follow, and, you know, when you go back and read backwards and you're like, oh, this has changed so much and defined, and it's much more defined now. It's one of the things I like about webcomics. It's so interesting when you go and look at the fic, you've got people posting in 2013 and going like, when we are in like book waiting land, here I have some fic, and I'm like, oh wow, that's like a bit of context I don't have, you know? But they're like waiting for the epilogue.
The general plot of Nimona features the titular character, our shape-shifting Nimona, becoming the sidekick and kind of villain in training to Lord Blackheart, Lord Ballister Blackheart more specifically, who is, as I said, the super villain and arch nemesis to Sir Ambrosius Goldenloin. And the entirety of Nimona first starts by covering various adventures she has with Ballister, as Ballister is thwarted by Ambrosius Goldenloin over and over again. And we see them have many shenanigans. We see development of a backstory between Ambrosius and Ballister when they were at Hero in Training School. And throughout the book and towards the end of the book, we start to learn more about Nimona and her background as a shapeshifter, how she became a shapeshifter, and then essentially how she kind of reconciles her shape-shifting nature to her desire for villainy. And when we end the book, well, do we want to go like that far?
I mean, it is like a full spoilery podcast, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's very true. So essentially, by the end of the book, we see Ballister and Goldenloin kind of reunited, and Nimona has essentially transformed into her true self and has left them both behind to go off and pursue essentially her own adventures and kind of take off and stop being someone else's sidekick and start being the central part of her own story.
Perfectly bittersweet as an ending.
So beautiful.
Yes, it is perfectly bittersweet. We get happy endings. I would say we get happy endings for everyone, if not necessarily the endings we thought we were going to get. That about covers the general plot. But of course, as always, there's so much more to the story.
Especially with visual storytelling, even if something's not part of the main plot. Like, you could go through all of the subplots even, and you're not going to pick up everything on one read.
Oh yeah, this is definitely a graphic novel that is well served by rereading it more than once, which is easy to do because it's really cute. The art style is adorable. It's not necessarily a complex comic, but there's definitely
a
lot
of
going
tension
on
in it. I was surprised when I reread it because I kind of remembered the main gist of it, but there were definitely bits that I'd forgotten, that, you know, jokes that I'd forgotten about that made me laugh again. And I was reading this, you know, on my commute into work and then back, which is not necessarily when you can get the most into something. And I was so on the edge of my seat when they get into a bit more conflict later on in the story. It's just incredible, like, how tense it gets and how high the stakes are.
And it does a really good job of playing with that traditional, like, fairy tale structure in its narrative of kind of subverting that hero versus villain kind of classical structure that we get. And it really brings up questions of, like, what does it mean to be a villain and what does it mean to want to be a villain? Because Nimona struggles a lot with wanting to be, I guess I shouldn't say struggle. She wants to be a villain and she starts to question why it is that she has that desire so strongly.
Yeah, she deals a lot with her own anger issues, and partly that's because she sees Ballister as a villain in a very different way than he sees himself. He's very much like, well, that's the role I've been given, that's what I'm going to do. But he's not a villain in the sense that she assumes he is when she first comes in as his sidekick, and she kind of struggles to understand him and why he does things. So that I
Which
also
he's
really
much more of a
enjoyed.
he's much more of a mad scientist than anything else, and kind of only a mad scientist because he's sort of been shoved into that box because his hero days were ended before they could really begin by someone who was supposed to be his best friend. I have a lot of feelings about this comic, guys.
Yeah, I have a lot of feelings about that. Well, and that's part of it too, though, because, you know, obviously in the kind of meta narrative, we're given this, you know, Ambrosius Goldenloin is this prototypical hero. You know, he literally, I mean, his name is goddamn Goldenloin.
Super fabulous,
like, I
shiny
mean,
blonde hair.
He's got like the flowing hair, and he's very like, he reminded me of Prince Charming from the Shrek movies, like that very over the top, like hyper masculine, but at the same time, like, he's not the good guy. He's actually a huge dick. And he's very petty, and he gets really jealous, and he takes a lot of
follows orders.
like,
he doesn't really question things.
Yeah,
much.
like he's a non-thinking entity, and the people behind him are not.
Like, he just doesn't. He has very shiny hair, but he is a bit of an idiot, and he doesn't really understand things in the same way. He doesn't really have the same instinctive moral compass that Ballister has, which is interesting because obviously he's the one who ends up in the role of the hero. But I guess I would say maybe he's more like lawful neutral and Ballister's more chaotic bitch.
That is a really fair assessment.
Oh, yeah. That is, yeah. I would say I'd not put it in those terms, but yeah, that's a very fair assessment, I think. Then what does Nimona become?
Chaotic neutral. I mean, I don't know. I feel a lot of it is her defending
when she
herself.
separates and she's got her dragon entity side. I just don't know. I feel
like a lot of it is her defending herself, and I'm also quite interested in, like, we're never really told what the story of her life actually is. We don't really know the truth. But if she's truly a creature that's not actually human, it's like, can you
can't
put
our
those
moral restraints on her,
like,
can you?
Is the cat in fact evil? No, I mean, like, if the cat swipes at you because you come too close, because, like, you know, like, that's not a creature you can, you know, that's not on the same level as you in terms of communication, then, you know. And you see a lot of her anger being triggered by fear response. Like, you know, when Ballister very, very, like, honestly, with no further, like, with no thought behind it, no bad thought behind it, says, oh, we can experiment to check the thing. And she's like, no, we're not doing any experiment because I'm not a lab rat. And you can tell that's from a bad experience.
Yeah. Yeah, she's definitely, there's almost some, like, PTSD.
She definitely has a traumatic
anxiety
past,
stuff
which
that
we
she's
definitely don't ever get a real story on, which I don't blame her at all for not telling him the real story of where she came from and what happened to her.
Yeah, and I think it's more powerful as a narrative technique.
I agree. Well, and I almost think it doesn't necessarily matter. I mean, like, it's good development and it's interesting to know, but, like, for whatever reason she has this anger, now we're at the place where, like, she has it and she has to reconcile it and work through it.
Yeah, and she might not be human, but there's no doubting her personhood. You know, there's no... Once that's agreed to, once you know she's a person, and it's not really, I don't know, relevant what exactly she is.
Yeah, she still has certain, like, there's still certain parameters of respect and dignity that you treat any sentient personhood holding entity with, even if she's not necessarily a human.
Which, the questioning her personhood and whether or not she's human thing reminds me, this is such an amazing examination of the intersections between magic and science in SFF.
I love that.
Because it's this weird anachronistic amalgamation of, like, a kind of pseudo-medieval setting, but there's also advanced technology like computers and
like
video
crazy
phones,
science, yeah.
And there's glowing green things, and, like, they have, what is that character's name? The other scientist lady?
Meredith Blissmere. Dr.
What's Meyer?
Meredith Blissmere.
So she is
magical
she's
scientist.
trying to harness the same power that, like, the sorcerers use through science with her glowing green thingy.
Well, and it's interesting because a scientific invention is essentially kind of what stops the magic that Nimona has. Like, it's not really ever in detail explain, like, how Nimona's shapeshifting
Works.
like functions and how the science that stops her functions, but essentially, if we assume that she is a non-human semi-magical being, she is then kind of thwarted by the development of this scientific green glowing gun
And
thing.
even though magic exists in this world and they kind of accept that it's just a thing, I mean, Blackheart does at one point get really confused by her powers because they, like, know of shapeshifters, but hers doesn't seem to be constrained by size or the normal limitations that he is aware of.
And he's, like, talking about physics and math and how that works and where her clothes go and stuff like that, you know?
I mean, he literally, like, he reminds me of every person that I know who is, like, not necessarily, like, an SFF reader who reads it and then is like, but what about this? But where do her clothes go? But why isn't she then naked when she unchanges? And I'm just like, it's
the same
too much,
people
man.
who
You're
are
going
angry
too
about the
deep. You need to pull
Hulk's
back.
shorts, you know? Like, some things you just have to accept are part of the world's canon.
Yeah, like, some things, like, that's where that whole suspension of disbelief comes in. Like, you just have to go with it. And this book plays with that because Ballister, as kind of that evil scientist, has a hard time.
It's very meta.
Doing
it's
that.
Very meta.
One of the things that I particularly like about the other scientist character, Dr. Meredith Blissmere, is when Ballister calls her up to ask for her help, he looks at her card that she gave him, her contact card, and it says magical scientist with, like, a little star that goes to a footnote that says not a witch. And it's like, that was so perfect, you know, because...
Which, like...
Different classification.
And that's why I love this comic, because that's such a little thing, but in that is wrapped up that idea of, like, magic versus science and how gender plays into that, and, like, the history of women in science and the relation to witchcraft, and, like, all of that stuff is wrapped up in this one tiny little, like, very funny...
And it's...
like, side
And it's one of those
note.
things that, you know, I had never really examined, but a while back, I don't know, I just realized I really, really am into all types of things that have magic studied as a science. Every time that shows up in a book, I'm like, yes, this is excellent. You know, like that series with the dragon naturalist lady who...
by
the Marie
Brennan.
Brennan books, The History of Dragons. Those are so good.
I still need to read those.
There's a Patsy reading
They're
series
so
about a
good.
girl who goes and studies like magical creatures in the same way as well. The encrypted books that I've been reading.
Okay, so I want to switch gears a little bit because I want to talk about Ballister and Ambrosius and how in love they are. Yay. And how much I love how in love they are and how good it is.
I love that it's established fairly early on that, like, you could read it as they're just former friends, but to me it's very obviously kind of bitter exes. Like, from the very beginning, like from their first interaction, that was how I read that.
And that's what I like about it, because I think you can start reading it that way, but by the end, it is made like pretty texturally, visually, explicitly clear that like they are in love. Like there are like hands on cheeks and like whispered farewells, and like it is very clearly textually coded that that their relationship is a romantic one.
At some point, Ballister says to Dr. Blitzmeyer, Nimona is going to kill someone that I love. Or he's going to kill her or whatever, you know, he phrases it that way, and I think it's quite, you know, it's not the kind of thing that straight dudes say about their straight dude friends, because masculinity is very toxic.
Yeah, it's not a bro thing.
No, but yeah, it's, and just the level of emotion that he shows when he thinks that Ambrosius is not going to survive Nimona's attack. Like you said, like it goes above what would normally be like put across as just like, this is my hetero straight bro friend and like, I am sad.
To knock the power
like it
of
goes
male
beyond
friendship.
that.
We're not saying that, but like this is
no, not at all. But that's what I'm saying.
Coded.
Like there are ways that is put across that it's just a friendship thing, and this narrative explicitly goes beyond that to indicate like bro love is great, but this is more than that. Like there is a history.
It's not bro love, early bros in love.
It starts very early on. I was just looking at my copy here, and you know, I'm on like page 12, and you have this fight that they are in at the very beginning before they've properly reconnected, when they're just doing their hero and villain nemesis like dance around each other. And like Ambrosius is enjoying himself so much, and you can see that Ballister is like a bit worried because Nimona is there and kind of messing things up, and Ballister's just like, no, we need to do the fighting because this is what we do and this is the only way we can interact with each other, and I want to interact with you. And then right after that, page 15, he's just like, you need to go right now because guards are going to arrive, and he just clearly wants to like make sure that he does not get captured.
And I was gonna say, I'm looking at that same panel, and there's like a hand on a shoulder, and it's just like, it's one of those ineffable things that's hard to describe because it's captured in the artistic rendering of the moment, but there's just like a level of concern there that you can tell that even this early on, whatever their relationship is, the relationship between these two men goes beyond just like, I am the villain and you are the hero.
Also at some point, Ambrosius agrees to like hunt down Nimona and kill her basically on the condition that Ballister will be safe. So
even at the very beginning, like Ambrosius clearly just wants to have like banter and like does not want to hurt Blackheart. Like at one point when Blackheart's like trying to leave to go after Nimona, Ambrosius is like, this isn't how things are supposed to go. Like he wanted to have their usual banter and like fight, and he's like, you're supposed to be paying attention to me right now.
Are you trying to make me jealous?
That's like how it comes across, honestly.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing, is like, clearly this is not a duel for one of them to hurt the other ones. Like, I mean, they want, like, that's what Ambrosius kind of wants people to think, because that's how duels work, but he's obviously not out to actually harm
The
Ballister.
only reason that something like that works, the only reason that, you know, that they're like kind of, oh no, we're rivals, we hate each other kind of little scenario works, is because you are in an heteronormative society that expects that of them. And you know, they're in a society where clearly their relationship is frowned upon, because you have some comment later on that like when they were young at the institution, the evil guy's institution, Ambrosius was taken aside and told that, you know, he's a very promising knight, and therefore he must stop this like unnatural relationship right now because it's not going to stand him in good stead. And you can see that if you are either a reader or within a society that expects that, you know, this relationship is a possible thing, it's really obvious that it's there, you know. Like with many, many, many other pieces of media, if one of them was a girl, it would be super obvious that they're into each other.
And instead it is heavily coded, because at the same time, like up until about the very end, you could continue to read this on a surface level of like that unnatural relationship is because one of them is evil and one of them is good and doesn't have anything to do with their gender. Like on a very surface level reading, you could take that as the quote unquote unnatural relationship he's referring to. Like somebody who's a hero shouldn't be friends with someone who's a villain. That's not but like, because we are readers who are able to see past that surface level of coding, there's obviously something going on there that's explicitly queer and explicitly kind of homophobic. So, which I also think is interesting given the way that Nimona is drawn. The way Nimona is drawn aesthetically is coded in a way that I think syncs up with a lot of the visual codings for queer women.
I think that's fair.
And I was just wondering what we thought about that, especially given her like abilities as a shapeshifter and her nature as a shapeshifter. I'm just wondering if there's even anything to that, or if that's
she does shift into boys and or men several times in the book, and that's that, you know, it reminds me a lot of the discourse that was around the Harry Potter fandom between like books 5 and 6, I think it was, like when Tonks first appeared, or between books 4 and 5, when we were saying, well, this is someone who's a shapeshifter and who has like spunky colored hair, and this is someone who might well be genderqueer. And again, like, what's the meaning of gender if like there's no such thing really as physical sex? And anyway, she's a dragon, so,
I do want to point out she's a dragon. I do want to point out she's in a skirt basically anytime she is in her, it's not her like natural form, but like her standard character design. She's always not in pants. So when people are like, she's dressed like a boy, I'm always like, I mean, no.
What you're saying is she has short hair.
What you're saying is you look at her character design and you see some boyish element, which I don't think is the intention at all.
I do think it's interesting that she's in a skirt, but they're also able to, like, she's also very well outfitted for battle. Like, she's got that nice heavy chest plate. Like, I guess what I'm getting at is it stays away from some of that, like, tankini armor and, like, dress armor that is so popular amongst, like, especially video gamers, but just kind of general battle heroines, especially in fantasy.
I mean, also, she can't really be hurt, so what's the point, you know? Like, she heals very quickly, so what's the point? But on the cover, the form that she has on the cover of the book is her standard character design, with the skirt and a really short red hair, but then she has, like, wings and a tail, and it's clearly, like, you know, this is to indicate here's the dragon girl, you know? So I think that's, a really interesting thing.
And I do think it's interesting. I've read interviews where Stevenson basically mentions when she does cosplay herself, she generally dresses up as male characters, and that did have an effect in her design of Nimona and her shapeshifting and the choices that she makes there.
And also at the end, when there is in the epilogue, when Ballister's like looking for people who might be Nimona, checking on him, there is a shot looking at a woman who is, or a female presenting person really, who has an undercut and pink hair and is wearing lipstick and an earring and is in a skirt,
similar
and,
outfit,
turns around and like kind of eyes him, but that's really, you know, but in the same breath he's saying this might be her or she might be this cat, and you know, this really not, he can't tell. Here's a person that reminds him of her, but he can't tell. Oh yeah, I think she has piercings in her normal design as well, but she has an eyebrow one, so that's cool.
I love the sketchy art style that Stevenson uses, generally always, but like particularly in this, it's sort of her signature style. If you've read some of her other things, like she also does work on Lumberjanes, which, yay, Lumberjanes.
I was gonna say, it comes across really well with Lumberjanes. Like, the aesthetics between the two are
which,
very,
like, the
very
line
similar.
art is a bit different in Lumberjanes. The character designs are definitely a little more solid. But I love the art just as much.
Although there are similar hairstyles in Lumberjanes. That's what it always makes me think of. There's a trans character in Lumberjanes who has a similar like undercut side hair wave thing
Which I
going
love.
on. And that just makes me and she's one of my favorite character in Lumberjanes, so I'm just
Exciting.
I'm like all over it.
I am so behind on
Yeah,
Lumberjanes.
that's another solid rec for Lumberjanes if you liked Nimona.
Oh, yeah.
If you liked Nimona, definitely check out Lumberjanes.
100%.
It's something you will enjoy for sure.
It's so funny.
Yeah, it's very funny. But it's the kind of funny where if you try, because I've tried like to explain it later to people why it's funny, and they just give you that look. So it's a very
Well,
much
there's a lot
like
of visual
contextual
humor,
heavy.
and it's a lot of in-world jokes.
Like when she pops up and she says, "I'm not a girl, I'm a shark." That I just
shark
like
is hysterical laughter
it makes
every
me laugh
time.
so hard.
But I think it's the just juxtaposition of, that image of, a lot of people throughout the comics say, oh, but she's a little girl, we can't hurt her kind of thing. And it's the juxtaposition of that versus, the fact that she is in fact a shark and also a dragon and also a cat and also, all kinds of people.
And also like a homicidal
that
maniac
too.
who has no problem with,
I find it very
killing
interesting that when she is kind of reverting to her little girl form, like even more of a little girl form when she is split
when she's
between
got the
herself.
bow and the long hair.
Yeah, between dragon and she's much more like a traditional image of what a little girl is. And I'm wondering if that's because as a child, if that's because from experience that's the form that like people want to help her in the most,
Yeah,
or if
that
it's
could be.
just like
Yeah.
just coding from a narrative standpoint that like here's an innocent character.
Well, it's fairly meta because I think almost every time she appears in that form in the comic, it's a story being told about her past, right? All but one time.
Yeah, except at the end, obviously.
We don't even know if that's her self-image or if that's what Blackheart is picturing her as, or like that's never actually addressed. So that's, I thought, was really interesting as well.
Yeah, I thought it would be really interesting to think like if that's the form that she as like a weird hell beast who can change shape decides, yeah, that's the form that will get the most humans to help me.
Which, to
Fair
be fair, like,
assessment.
she's had long enough that she probably figured some of that out. Like, I think it's interesting to go through every iteration of her backstory and kind of tease out which of the narrative lines are the same. Because I think if you can do that, there are some overlapping kind of narrative pieces that give, like, a shadow of an idea of what happened to this girl. And either way, it's like a story of tragedy. Like, in whatever circumstances, this is somebody who kind of lost their family and their parental units and stuff. But I just think that it's, like you said, I wonder, it's interesting to know if it's just because that's how Blackheart has pictured her, and so that's how she's come to picture herself, or if there's something bigger than that going on there.
Yeah, I really like the I just really like all of the graphics around her changing shape. When she's kind of like melting from a little boy into a cat when they're at a science fair, or like there are a few panels where her arms are turning super big because she's like semi-hulking out.
That form always creeps me out a little bit, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Yeah, when she's got like the giant hairy
Yes!
arms.
That's kind of meant to be a bit uncanny, I like how she's, oftentimes when she's an animal, she's always like in pinks or reds, but it doesn't seem to be like a necessary thing because it doesn't happen when she's like as a person. So I like the idea that she chooses to go for that because like then people get confused as to what she can become or not.
Yeah.
I just really like the colorings a lot. I really like the color panels that Stevenson went with. Like, I like all the greens and yellow tones anytime they're in the science labs, especially towards the end. And then I like that kind of like almost sepia toned like flashback way, because I think that that's something that not every comic artist can do well, is delineate time and timelines in the visuals of their graphic novels. So I think that because Nimona has so many kind of back and forths in all of the storylines, she does a really good way of delineating that artistically. It makes it really easy to know when you're in the past and when you're in like the present of the novel.
Yeah, absolutely. What really struck me was that I really got the sense when I was done reading it that we don't know what Nimona is, we don't know what creature she is, but I found it really like obvious that whatever creature she is young, And people are
whatever
like,
that means for her particular
exactly
creatureness. Yeah.
And I like the idea that, you know, she might not be a little girl, but, you know, that doesn't mean that she's not quite clearly someone who's, you know, young and need to be protected.
And, you know, and there are definitely moments, I mean, you can see that there are moments she lacks maturity, moments she lacks, like, forethought and the ability to listen to Blackheart when he tries and kind of explain things to her, and she's very impetuous, and a lot of that is probably her nature as a shapeshifter, and just because she doesn't have to worry about a lot of those same things, but I think part of that definitely comes from also being young, whatever that means.
So on the 4th page, when they're, like, going through their first plan together, Nimona straight up says, "We could do with more general chaos." And, like, that just kind of is her entire life philosophy, as far as I can tell, which makes sense for a trickster figure.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. Because, like you said, that's literally, like, her whole...
Yeah, my favorite bit is the whole, like, suppressed emotion in the moment where they're about to go into battle and Ambrosius stops Ballister and says, wait, I just want to say I, and Ballister's just like, there's no time! And they just run into battle. And it's just like, yeah.
Can my favorite line be from not the actual comic?
Yes.
Can it
The
be
Christmas
from
epilogue?
one of the extras? Yeah, duh. I'm trying to decide between I punched a hole in the wall to build you a
That one's so
fireplace
good.
and the one at the academy where Goldenloin says, go get your knight so we can play. And Ballister says, you know, I think I lost mine because he gave it
Who is
to
an
Ambrosius
idiot and
my
didn't
heart
realize
is
it's the same night.
Shut up, Claire! Shut up, Claire! Take it back! It's so sweet!
It's
Take it back!
adorable,
Shut
but
up, Claire!
part of why it's so sweet is that Ambrosius is still so naive that
He
he's
doesn't
not going
get
to
it.
realize
He
it.
doesn't get what his friend has done
And
for
Ballister
him.
knows about it.
But it's just like,
cute. So
yeah, okay, I think
cute.
that's gonna be my favorite one.
I do like I punched a hole in the wall and put fire in it though.
I know, that's a really good one too. That's a really good one.
I'm just over here
'Cause that's just how
hysterically
Nimona does shit.
laughing, because that's so very Nimona.
It's so very Nimona.
She's like your cat who will go and kill something and leave it for you and, like, not understand why you're not delighted with this thing she has brought you.
I mean, I think
Right.
her true form is probably something feline. That's gonna be my my go for that.
Well, I think it's the dragon, which, like, are often depicted as sort of feline
Yeah, maybe her true
in their
form.
behavior.
Maybe her true form is Toothless, who is like a kitten, really.
Basically.
Yeah, that is our conversation on Nimona, guys. I think that is about, I think that's good. So we will transition to kind of wrapping it up. Does anybody have anything ongoing they want to chat about?
By the time this podcast comes out, I'll probably have a few things on my channel, kind of wrapping up reading goals for the year and making reading goals and bookish goals for 2017. And stuff like that, but I think mostly the biggest, most important thing at the moment is this new podcast, which is really exciting.
Yay! New projects. Do you have anything, Kay, by the time this
Mine
comes
is
out?
basically just all my usual ongoing things. I should have 1 or 2 more Book Riot posts up by the time this goes live, and we'll link those. And I also am still going to be doing my Star Trek Fic Rec a Day.
Which is over on your
It's just
Twitter
on
right
Twitter.
now, right?
I'm very slowly moving that over to my blog as well, so they're all in big posts, but that takes so much time. They are also all in, like, a Twitter moment, so that's pretty easy access.
And then by the time this comes out, kind of the only big thing, I too will have probably some new content up on the YouTube channel. But as per requested by some viewers that I have, when I mentioned wanting to get more into romance in 2017, I will be putting together, or will have put together, a little book reads group. I'm going to call it Sexy and 17, and I'm going to be announcing 1 romance book a month that I'll be reading. I'll probably read more than that, but I'll do a little group read, buddy read kind of convo on 1 a month. And I will link that in our show notes, and we'll have more info about it over on my YouTube channel. But yeah, if you are also a romance newbie and looking for somebody to chat to about some romance books, come hang out with me.
Come hang out
It'll
with
be
you.
fun.
And romance newbies, this is Kay. Feel free to hit me up on Twitter, and I will give you recommendations.
Oh, yes. Most of what we will be reading, most of the books I will pick probably came from Kay, either from Kay or from the demographically similar Jennies.
If you guys don't listen to the Reading the
I
End
love them.
podcast, you should. They're great.
You should. And yeah, the two Jennies are amazing. And they sent me, I wasn't sure if it was Whiskey Jenny or Gin Jenny that actually sent me the recommendations, but one of them did.
Probably a group effort.
So I will have lots of stuff from there. Oh, yeah. But yeah, so that's our current projects and our convo. In a couple of weeks, we will be reading When a Scot Ties the Knot by Tessa Dare, which Kay has read before, but Claire and I never have. So we will be tackling some new to us books for the first time and some romance. So yeah, it should be really exciting. Join us then. Of course, you can always hit us up on all of our internet places. Everything will be on the website. Anything else, ladies?
I think that was all.
Or ready to say goodbye?
No, I think we're good.
All right. Bye,
Bye.
guys.
Bye.
You've been listening to Sisterhood of the Traveling Paperbacks, a podcast made by 3 online besties and all-around lady nerds. Channel art provided by Claire Russo. Music credits to Malt Shop Bot by Kevin MacLeod. You can get in touch with the Sisterhood at paperbackssisterhoodpodcast@gmail.com, at paperbackspod on Twitter, or at our website paperbacksisters.wordpress.com. You can reach Kay at @KTaylorRay on Twitter, Claire at @Claire Russo, and Chelsea at @An Outlaw Life. Additional credits, show notes, and transcripts will be available on our website. Thank you so much for listening.
No paperbacks were harmed in the making of this program.
That's totally straight. That's totally how straight dudes greet their straight friends.